will not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow down.
Let my people go.
Hello and welcome to episode 15 of the Croydon Constitutionalist podcast, bringing classical liberalism to South London and beyond via YouTube, Stitcher and Apple Podcasts. My name is Dan Heaton and my partner in podcasting today is Mike Swadling, the co-founder of the Croydon Constitutionalists. Mike, what have we got to discuss today?
Hello Dan, hello everyone. So today we're talking about the general election as always and about our My Tuppenceworth event held last week in South Croydon.
Excellent. So, general election coming up on the 12th of December, and the past week or so we've had a few manifestos being launched. The Conservative one, I believe, has been launched in the last hour or so. Many promises, some of them more realistic than others, I fear. Mike, in terms of the Labour manifesto, if we go through that first, what are the key bits that you've picked out from that?
We're all going to be a lot poorer. The Labour manifesto is a long list of spending plans, as one might expect from them, but it's a really long list of spending plans, and I think it's an ideologue's dream of everything you'd want to possibly put forward. Not sure. It plays into a narrative, and if you like that narrative, you'll love it. If you don't like that narrative, or you're slightly concerned and you were tempted to vote Labour, I think it would fight against you. A couple of things that pulled out to me: £10 minimum wage. Everyone loves the idea of giving the poorer working people more money, but £10 minimum wage means more machines, less people, and could be very counterproductive. Stopping the pension, the rise in pension age. Again, we'd all love to retire early, but with an ageing population, someone's got to pay for it. And nudging up the retirement age as people live longer makes a lot of sense to help towards that. And of course, the thing we all know about is the second referendum. Dan, over to you to explain how the referendum, how the Labour Party's Brexit policy will work.
Well, I mean, it's a moving feast because essentially the idea is that they will not be going forward with Boris Johnson's deal. They will go to Brussels and say, hello, we'd like a different deal. We suspect, though we don't know, exactly that might involve a customs union and probably staying pretty much within the single market. And then that deal will then be put to the British people in a referendum with the option of that deal, which is essentially Remain in all but name, and the alternative will be Remain. But don't worry, because the dear leader, Jeremy Corbyn, has said that he will remain neutral in that referendum. But he's by that point, cabinet ministers will be able to decide which way they want to go. Not sure that going to Brussels with that as your starting point for your negotiations is going to get you anything like a good deal. But yeah, that's where we are with this policy. It's baffling. Indeed, it's laughable, and many people have been laughed at when they've tried to explain this. Many Labour people have been laughed at when they've tried to explain this. It's a complete shambles, and I think it's a very poor attempt to basically the two wings of the Labour. Well, I won't even say two wings of the Labour Party. You've got the Labour Party, or the vast swathes of the Labour Party membership, versus a good chunk of Labour Party voters, and it's a balancing act that may have worked in 2017. I don't really think it's anything like credible in 2019.
No, and we look locally. We have MPs who in Croydon North, an MP Steve Reid, who's rabidly anti-Brexit. rabidly really ignoring the manifesto and saying we're here to stop Brexit. Sarah Jones, who we know has the same opinion based on her voting record, but is frankly too frit to voice it in Croydon Central, which voted Leave, and you can't square this circle of being for Brexit and against Brexit. As you say, it worked in 2017. It doesn't possibly work now. And they just, every time they try to explain it, and the big takeaway from the leaders' debate was just how foolish it looks when they try and do that.
Definitely. Now, yeah, but there's more. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say on the Labour manifesto, the long before we go away from it was the business side of it. I think it was the Institute of Fiscal Studies who gave the initial reaction with Andrew Neil. Throughout this manifesto is a poison laced for business, and anyone that's ever started a business or been involved in the finances of a business, it ain't easy. You take a lot of risk on when you try and go out on your own, and you just wouldn't do it if there's too much taxation, if there's no reward. You just wouldn't do it if there's no reward. And most of us, we start a business and small, and it stays that way. A few people go great guns, they create great big enterprises, and many of the people listening to this will be working for those people, those industries. In fact, indeed we are. Those risks will never be taken if you stifle any chance of getting a reward for running your business, which is the detail behind the Labour manifesto. The detail, some of the taxation on business suggests you go out, you take a risk, you employ people, and you know what? You'll get nothing for it.
Well,
Strange
that's right.
way to run an economy.
Well, they don't care, because you see some of the parts of the manifesto, and it explains where the complete direction of travel here. On the points of taxation, they want to put corporation tax back up, and they want to take extra money off anybody earning over £80,000 a year. So you what's the point of the corporations in effect taking risks, and what's the point of the individual bettering themselves either by setting up a business or bettering themselves in their career? You're going to just absolutely cap out, and that's just, it's stifling development and it's stifling aspiration. But it doesn't matter though, because you see, everything's going to be free. So you don't need money. What's money, eh?
Yeah.
Free broadband delivered by part nationalising British Telecom. This is brilliant stuff, this, right? Honestly, they're going to nationalise Openreach, which is the part of British Telecom which actually lays the cables, basically. So yeah, okay, everyone is going to have access to free broadband. Wonder if they're going to put any controls on that as to what you can actually access via this free broadband. Some of us are not great fans of the British Broadcasting Corporation. The Labour Party wants us to control what you actually see in the new media as well. Oh, well, okay. Sounds lovely. Probably stops hate crimes or something like that, they probably think. Well, hold on, here we go again. They're going to spend, I reckon, 75 billion to build 150,000 new council and social homes a year. Every year, 150,000 new council homes. Where are they going to build these?
Yeah, where on your green spaces is the only possible option.
It's absolute craziness. But, they can probably afford it because anybody who's got a second home is going to get taxed on it. So anyone who's renting out property in the private sector, no one's going to, they're going to reduce the supply there, but it's okay because they're spending so much money on council properties.
The great big council estates of the past were fraught with problems. It doesn't make sense to soup and concentrate council services or council housing in that way. If you're building 150,000 new homes a year, you're going to have a lot of that super concentration. Mixed developments where you have as often a lot of private setups are, where you have some councils or some private rent, some affordable homes, some fully private homes, makes a much more sense, a much more balanced community. And that kind of ambitious building plan for just council homes simply won't deliver that. And it builds problems for our future. You know, we look at the great big council estates around here, we look at the great big tower blocks. They were not a good idea, and they're no better an idea now, 50 years after they were first tried out.
Absolutely, absolutely. But, you know, there's more. Oh, there's more in this wonderful document. We've got giving EU nationals living in the UK the automatic right to stay. Well, okay, maybe if they've come here legally, but, you know, there's talk of this different deal on Brexit, even if it's not the Remain option that's on the ballot paper. So, hey, they're gonna extend that. So what they're also going to do is reduce the voting age to 16.
On the EU citizens, I think it's perfectly reasonable if you come here legally. Of course, you have a right to stay. I would see that as a way. I would provide a incentive scheme to integrate further, so that you are on a path to citizenship, which has very low barriers as you came here under the EU, but you know, some in work to do to kind of encourage a more integrated society, which is something I would hope we all want. In terms of the votes for 16, I have no problem moving the age of maturity to whatever. I mean, I don't think it makes sense to lower it, but whatever. But isn't it interesting how you get the right to vote at 16, but you don't have the obligation to pay tax till you're 18 in the form of, say, council tax. You don't have to pay for your education until you're sort of an adult, or unless you go to work. In your 20s. Contracts are at 18 even. Marriage is at that sort of age, although you can with your parents' permission. There's a whole this kind of blurred thing. If you want to move the age of maturity, fine. At 16, you can pay for your education, you can drive, you can sign contracts and make money from them and be held liable for them, and you can pay your council tax and you can vote. That's perfectly reasonable. But to say you get all of the benefits but none of the obligations is a very dangerous precedent to set. And of course, Labour want to do it because they think the youth will vote for them. In reality, they can't often be bothered to get out of bed, let alone vote.
Well, that's certainly true with some adolescents. But what's not actually in the manifesto, but has been announced subsequently, and therefore is completely uncosted, is the suggestion that they're going to effectively compensate the WASPy women, the women who were born in the 1950s who've apparently missed out on certain amounts of pension because they've been caught up in the various changes of the pension age, and it's perceived that they didn't have enough time, having been told what the changes were going to be, to make provision for their old age. Apparently, it's just going to pay them a load of money, despite the fact the courts have said that they're not entitled to it.
If anyone here knows how they're going to pay for Christmas and a great big holiday and earn less money and buy themselves a new motor all at once, then and without dramatically having some sort of reducing their savings or something, please explain it to me, and I might then be tempted to vote Labour, because that's what Labour's saying, is that we can pay for everything we possibly want, buy all the gifts in the world, without suddenly making you all poor and without borrowing to high heaven. Well, they are borrowing, but they seem to think everything is possible. Now we all know that's not possible. We all know this time of year you're thinking about some of your outgoings and you're thinking about the treats you're buying for the end of the year and what have you. Why is it any different for the government? It isn't, unless of course you're in the parallel universe of the Labour manifesto.
Well, quite, and that's that's enough about the Labour manifesto and that wonderful wish list. We've got the Conservative Party manifesto that has come out just in the last few hours. A much smaller, concise document by the sound of it, with only 59 pages. Highlights being a triple tax lock, so they're definitely no new taxes, as what somebody once said, but they're saying they're not going to put income tax or national insurance or VAT up over the course of the 5-year Parliament, and they're going to raise the national insurance threshold. Let's have a look. The social care issue, which caused them so many problems in 2017. Not so much on that this time. An extra £1 billion a year over the life of the Parliament, but they're looking to create a consensus on social care. So that'll be an interesting discussion, I'm sure, with the the Labour Party, whoever may be the leader in due course. But yeah, I mean, some stuff on the environment. Just looking it through here. One of the sort of highlights is certain people won't have to pay for parking in hospitals. I think it's the disabled or people who perhaps are undergoing treatment on a regular basis. They're going to be exempt from that.
Can I just jump in there? I think that's a really positive thing that they found some middle ground on that. I'm always very concerned when someone talks about no parking charges in hospitals. I'm even slightly concerned I may have stood on a manifesto that said that, but I can't quite remember. But it is a lovely idea and a foolish notion at the same time. If you make parking at hospitals free, people that are popping next door to Tesco will pop into the hospital. People who could have got the bus are perfectly able-bodied to come and see someone. Will drive in instead. People who may have thought about cutting their time shorter because cost is a factor won't, and that will just leave the parking space full for someone who really needs it. And you know, unless you suddenly put great big multi-story car parks the size of the hospital next to the hospital, free parking will cause a dilemma. There has to be a disincentive to park as well as an incentive to park. Clearly, if you're going for regular treatment and that's free, that sounds a sensible compromise. But yeah, free parking is a really popular policy, but just doesn't make a lot of sense.
So that's most of what's in the Conservative manifesto. Obviously, the main point is to get Brexit done, and they've got their oven-ready deal as they see it, and that's going to be what they're going to be talking about, I think, for the next 3 weeks in the run up to polling day. I don't think we need to talk about the Lib Dem manifesto. That's just, stop Brexit.
Just one thing I want to say on the Lib Dem manifesto. Can you think of any other policies they've got?
No. Lib Dems are traditionally the third party of Britain for 100 years now. Obviously, they were one of the two parties, or their former manifestation, for the couple of 100 years before that. Potentially, as of the 1st of February, no one will know a single Lib Dem policy. It's probably a worry for them. An existential crisis, I believe. Yeah, I mean, I suppose thinking about it, they've made some odd pledges, I think, based upon the stopping Brexit bonus or the Remain bonus or something, although it's completely fanciful. So they're going to have to really go back to the drawing board, aren't they? Hopefully in the new year, if Brexit occurs, let's say. Speaking of Brexit, the Brexit Party has issued its contract with the people as opposed to a manifesto. Obviously, getting Brexit done is also a big part of that manifesto. Seem to have moved to a position of demanding no extension to the transition period. So whether or not they're now potentially accepting the terms of Boris's deal as far as it goes. But a couple of other highlights from it would be basically effectively getting rid of the BBC, or certainly getting rid of the the television license, but also abolishing the House of Lords.
Yeah, getting rid of BBC Remain, fabulous. Yeah, abolishing the TV license, and that is the right way of going about it. The BBC can then stand or fall on whether anyone wants to pay for the biased nonsense. That's perfectly reasonable. Yeah, the Brexit Party, maybe the realisation they're not going to form a government. Clearly, that happened when they pulled down their slate of candidates. The realisation that even if they do get a couple of MPs, that's the sort of numbers we're talking about them getting. They can't dictate terms to Boris. What they can do is kind of hold him to account, and that's not unreasonable. But the Brexit Party formed a incredibly important purpose, and still does, in holding the Tories to account. But I think their lack of content in that manifesto reflects the likely outcome of the election.
Indeed. And speaking of that likely outcome, the polls are still showing healthy leads for Boris Johnson's Conservatives at the moment, often over 40%, with Labour sort of mid to high 20s, with the occasional one at 30%. So there's 2 or 3 weeks to go, and we all know what happened the last time the Conservatives issued a manifesto. But at the moment, it's certainly looking like the Conservatives will be the largest party, and by some way, if not getting a workable majority.
Yeah, absolutely. It's starting to embed those numbers now, and it feels like the changes have happened. There's nothing in any of those manifestos that's come as a surprise. So it's unlikely, my guess, that they're unlikely to change the polls very much now. What do you think, Dan, in terms of those are the national numbers? Obviously, I don't think we've seen numbers for per constituency, certainly not around here. But any thoughts on how they extrapolate at a local level?
So, in terms of Croydon Central, if the Lib Dems fall back, as they have been doing in the polls, that will probably be to the advantage of the Labour Party. Similarly, the Brexit Party, obviously we now know, has a candidate, but they're falling back in the polls as you would expect. But also, one of the reasons that they're falling back in some of the polls is because some of the polls are actually asking people who live in a particular constituency, they're asking them to choose from a list of parties that are standing in that constituency. So there are some constituencies, obviously half of them basically, where the Brexit Party aren't standing. So there are some people answering the questions in the survey that form the polls who are not allowed to say the Brexit Party. It's not an option they're being given. So by definition, different surveys will do it slightly different ways, but by definition, that will reduce the percentage for the Brexit Party, because it's impossible for you to select Brexit Party if you're in Croydon South, for example. Time will tell. I mean, if the Conservatives are able to get the sort of percentage that they got last time in Croydon Central, but the Lib Dems are able to get the sort of polling figures that they're getting on a national basis at the moment, I think Labour may be in trouble.
Yes, absolutely. Labour could be in a lot of trouble. The Lib Dem vote falling down is kind of a concern in Croydon Central, perhaps, and it's the Conservatives really need that to split more. The Labour vote to split more there to get across the line. But across the nation, Labour certainly looks in quite a lot of trouble. There has been the odd, having said there wasn't, I think there has been the odd constituency, Greater Grimsby being one that springs to mind, that should be an easy Labour win, and they're struggling to find Labour voters up there, and that's been a poll on an individual constituency basis. Yeah, quite a lot of change there.
Yeah, we may well see a number of constituencies that you would have never thought going conservative, or in one or two cases even going to the Brexit party. Of course, it might well be that some of those seats would go conservative, but Labour will hold on because of the Brexit party, or indeed, for that matter, vice versa in a few constituencies as well. Um,
Yes.
I'm thinking Peterborough, for example, which um, I mean, when they had the by-election, and admittedly it was a by-election, all three parties did reasonably well. Um, so if there's a similar split this time, Labour might retain the seat, whereas actually either the Conservatives or the Brexit Party might have won if the other one wasn't standing. Funnily enough, so
Yeah.
um, so you may well get that. So although the polls are certainly suggesting a workable Conservative majority, and that is definitely the favourite with the bookmakers, it does depend on where those votes fall, and it could. I can't see the Conservatives based on that polling. I can't see the Conservatives not being the largest party. That would be extraordinary. But whether they're able to get a majority, and certainly a workable one, will just depend on where the votes fall. Um, so I think even if the polls stay the same way, I think it'll still be a nerve jangling evening and early morning on the 12th and the 13th of December.
Absolutely.
Now, speaking of candidates locally, I suppose the local campaign, we've got a couple of more interviews that we've done with a couple of the local candidates, and those are now available on our website. Mike, who have we been interviewing?
Yes, so we've got a couple of interviews up in Croydon North. So these are pro-democracy and pro-Brexit candidates to differentiate them from the Lib Lab Green cons. Lib Lab Green, should I say, sorry. So Donald Eckerman, and apologies to Donald there for my enunciation of his surname. Interview with him. Local Conservative candidate, stood in the Wadden by-election for the Conservatives, stood in the local elections in 2018 for the Conservatives. A Crystal Palace fan, describes himself as a pharmacist, entrepreneur and Christian. Some interesting things got him into politics, what's made him stand and what he's been able to get involved in since he's been involved in politics and do for his local community. Also, for a party perhaps fewer people have heard of, we've got an interview with Candice Mitchell, the Christian Parties Alliance parliamentary candidate in Croydon North. They're a party that have run candidates in Croydon before, did the last election. They've been involved in supporting some of our proposals for capping council salaries at the level of the Prime Minister and in the Democ campaign. She's a local resident, although her submission doesn't say that. Her interview does, and she works up in the constituency on a number of church-based projects, and some interesting things to say about their very family values, but also pro-Brexit manifestos. So check those out, have a read, and good to support people that are supporting our democracy.
Absolutely, well, very interesting stuff. Going back to Croydon Central now, just a reminder that there is a hustings taking place at Fairfield Halls on Wednesday, the 4th of December from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Entry is free of charge, but you do need to register in advance, and you can do that via Eventbrite. Certainly be going along to that. Should be an interesting debate. And we will certainly here at the Croydon Constitutionalists keep you updated on any events over the next few weeks as they relate to the general election locally here in Croydon. Now then, Mike, we've had another one of our events. We've had another freedom of speech event, my Tuppenceworth. Mike, what occurred that evening?
Yes, so a really good event in the South Croydon Conservative Club. First time we've used the venue. Cheap beer and free hire are always good things. Great venue in South Croydon. We had people opportunity to speak for 3 minutes, and a short Q&A afterwards. And we had 8, 9 speakers on the night. covering quite a good wide range of subjects. Um, I was up talking about the Democratic elected mayor of Croydon. Peter Sonics, the Brexit Party candidate in Croydon Central, was talking about democracy and freedom. Alistair Donald, who's from the Academy of Ideas, was talking about identity politics. Phil Shepherd, who many of you all know, talking about how the rest of Europe needs to leave the EU and break free. Melky McDermott, someone who we've interviewed before, who's the leader of the London Libertarian Party, speaking about corporate responsibility on free speech. And Gavin Palmer talking about shareholder action. And two more, Chris Sharp about the dangers the EU poses to free speech, and Paul Oakley speaking about his journey in politics, a wide range of subjects. Really good to get an exchange of ideas. Good opportunity for lots of people to give a short speech who maybe aren't used to it, although many of those people are used to giving speeches, but something a bit different for some others as well. What did you make of the night, Dan?
I thought it was particularly good because it was particularly well attended, both by the people who actually spoke and others who came along to support and to ask questions and to enjoy the evening in the South Croydon Conservative Club. Whilst apparently there was some sort of other debate going on. Apparently it was on the telly, something to do with Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn, I think.
I suspect our audience was far larger. It was certainly far better informed.
Absolutely. So they braved the weather and decided not to bother themselves with that leaders debate. Very good speeches, and as you say, on a wide range of issues, and some challenging questions. Yeah, I mean, there's some stuff there that we've obviously talked about here on the podcast and elsewhere, but interesting to get some perspectives from a libertarian in Malachy McDermott. Putting the perspective of whether or not companies like Facebook should actually take some responsibility for ensuring that free speech is allowed, from the perspective of, well, they're not the government, they're a corporation, and corporations should be able to do what they want, which is a sort of quite a libertarian perspective. But obviously he's thinking about, well, yes, but they've got such a big piece of the pie in terms of social media, and maybe they do need to have some rules around what they do. Phil Shepherd, I thought was erudite in his discussion of other European countries and the history with the EU. Speaking as somebody who is, I think, at least half Russian, he certainly has a perspective on totalitarianism of many of these countries in their history. And very good to hear from Alistair Donald from the Academy of Ideas. So many of these people are locals to Croydon. Others travelled further. Obviously, Malachy coming from another part of London, and Alistair too. Interesting to have Paul Oakley attend from Lewisham. Because we basically got ourselves a little world exclusive there. So for those who don't know, Paul Oakley was a Conservative Party member for many years and indeed stood for Parliament for them back in the early 2000s. In around about 2010, I think it was, he packed up with the Conservative Party and very publicly joined UKIP, stood as an MEP, stood for Parliament a few times, and was very much involved with their NEC, sort of running the party over the last few years. And he's recently reached the conclusion that UKIP is basically done, and that he has very, very recently rejoined the Conservatives because he sees it as the party that can actually get Brexit done. So yeah, a world exclusive almost, if you like, that genuinely were not expecting to receive that news. But he chose the Croydon Constitutionalist event to break that news to the public. So yeah, no, an enjoyable evening, fascinating subjects, and something that I think we'll probably look to do again in a little while.
No, absolutely. I think that's a very rebuildable event, and hopefully more people who are listening would like to take part.
No, look forward to it. So some of those speeches have actually been written down and are available to review on our website. So do please pop along to the website and have a look at those. And if we organise another event in due course, do please come along. So just before we wrap up, if you've got any stories of anything going on in Croydon, anything to do with the election, any of the constituencies or any other constituencies nearby, do please get in contact with us. You can contact us at the Twitter at Croydon Const, via the Facebook page. You can contact us at the website, croydonconstitutionalists.uk, or via email at croydonconstitutionalists@gmail.com. Mike, what have we got coming up over the next few weeks?
Well, it's very much talking about updates from the election, so we'll keep the conversation going. Do get on our social media, particularly the Leavers of Croydon Facebook page has a lot of updates, a lot of stories going out. Great opportunity to find out what's going on in the area, and we'll keep posting updates. If you're not on our email list, email in and we'll get you added. So we're sending out some quite lengthy emails at the moment with updates. Hopefully, we don't normally. It's just during the election, and there'll be lots of news of what's going on around the area there. And what else we've got on? Well, we need to get some events booked in the new year. Hopefully, one at least to celebrate us leaving the EU. But we'll let you know more as time progresses.
Absolutely, watch this space, as they say. Well, we'll be doing another podcast, no doubt, in due course as events unfold over the election campaign. But until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Goodbye.